Hi, and welcome to Family Sociology. We're looking at what is family, and it's part 2. Now, here in part 2, we're going to carry on to the theories and how family sociology is studied as a science. The theories are going to consider based on research, and there's a lot of research there, so the theories are all based on the research. And so when we go through the research, it'll help you understand why their theories are standing so strongly there. Now, there are several theoretical perspectives, and it might be helpful to consider the theories a bit like sunglasses. Just as there are sunglasses with different shades and colors, that don't change the world. You look at a building with sunglasses, it doesn't change the building, it just changes the colors around that building. Theories are similar. Theories observe reality and view it from different perspectives or different colors. And they don't change reality. They view reality subtly or even dramatically different from one another based on their research that they have found. So let's begin with this. We can separate theories into two broad categories. There are macro and micro theories. Some that do a bit of both, actually, but we'll look at the two differences. Like the macro, this looks at the big picture. It studies how societal values and institutions affect family. Examples of these theorists would be structural functionalists and conflict theory as being broad strokes theorists, big view. The second type is what's known as micro. So this focuses on the individuals or small groups and emphasizes the relationships within individual families. So it looks more tightly into family, less about the big view. So what we're going to do is the example of that would be symbolic interactionalist and family systems theory. And so we're going to get started with structural functionalists. Now they're a macro. They see family as a social institution, like economy, religion, politics, education. These are all institutions. They see family as an institution, and as do other structures in society. The family is just one of them. The structural functionalists view family's functions to society to include a few things. There's 5 elements. One, and most primary to the structural functionalists, is that one of the functions of family is a reproduction or a reproductive function. Their job as a family is to produce children. The second is what's known as an economic function. Families look after themselves financially. Third, emotional security. Increasingly important is to provide this security to everyone in the family, especially within your children. 4 is parent-child to be law-abiding, contributing members of society. There's an informal and a formal element to that, where how do parents inform children of what's being involved in society? And that's where we introduce another term which is called socialization. And so this is the 5th point, the socialization or social placement. Families confer social status and reputation on their family members. And we'll come back to socialization later in the semester. So let's get started here with when families perform their functions well, they contribute to the social stability of society. It's kind of like the glue that holds society together from the functionalist perspective. The primary means of family educating their members or their children is through the process of socialization. And by definition, socialization is a lifelong process in which cultural knowledge of how to survive and participate in social life is passed on generationally. It explains how the family is related to other institutions, how it contributes to the society as a whole. Structural functionalists believe the role specialization increases the efficiency of family functioning. Essentially, the husband or the father fulfills what are known as instrumental roles. This is about meeting the family economic needs, making important decisions, and providing leadership. Alternatively, the wife, mother, she fulfills what are known as expressive roles. This is running the household, caring for the children. The children I'll back it up a bit. They were running the household, caring for the children, and meeting the emotional needs of the family. Now, you might be saying to yourself, that sounds rather antiquated. Aren't we more equitable in today's world than maybe as divided as that? And you would be correct in saying so, but this is also a theory that has looked at family for some time, and it's considered a particularly traditional view of family. And yes, families have been changing. And so it has some flaws, if you will, as a theory, and that was one. It doesn't look much at how family changes society and how society changes family. Okay. It emphasizes, that is, functionalism, emphasizes family relationships to other institutions and contributes to the whole. So there are some strengths and weaknesses to structural functionalism. It's not as clear in explaining why families and societies change. It often ignores topics like family violence and sexual abuse and sees delinquency and crime more as a social issue rather than a family problem. It's not very tolerant of differences from the standard North American family. This term, standard North American family, is described to be bias based on the time in the past. It's not a very current example. As such such term is a monolithic bias, is what it's described as coined by Margaret Reichler, to describe the tendency to see all families as the same. There's one correct form, the standard North American form, and its universal functions. Everyone adheres to all the 5 functions described earlier. Well, we know, just even from our little example to begin this with, who is your family? Not all families are the same. They're not all standard North American families. Like structural functionalism, the second theory that we're going to review is conflict theory. And conflict theory, like structural functionalism, is a macro perspective. It views the family from the perspective of the larger society. Now, according to Marxist theory, the economic system of a society has a profound influence on all social groups, including the family. Now, some theorists, Marxism, stress negative influences that are concerned with power relationships and inequity. Others focus on how families compete with other social institutions for scarce resources. So if we look at an example of how family benefits in the workplaces are negotiated, a number of sick days, for example, or maternity days or family days. How and with whom are they negotiated? Do the negotiating members have equal power and authority? Not likely. According to the Marxist theory, this inequity has been growing throughout human history, setting the owners of industry and corporations and the wealthy on the path to control, and the rest of us not so much. It's been a rough process that family has gone through these changes, and conflict theory are not very strong at demonstrating how families contribute to society as a whole. Neither are they very good at explaining why society's norms and values for family tend to change so slowly. Now we're going to look at our first micro perspective. We're going to look at symbolic interactionalism. It looks at the face-to-face interactions between family members, and accordingly, individuals develop a sense of self, status, or one's social position and the roles, that is, the behaviors associated with the statuses, that's what roles are. It's through the attitudes and relationships with others, and they develop a sense of the roles they are expected to fulfill. And that's through that face-to-face interaction, parents teaching, if you will, and children listening and or making alterations. This perspective considers the range of ways families express love, the range of ways that families communicate, problem solve, socialize, participate in the community or society, the roles of husband and wife, and how these roles may adjust due to illness, loss of job, promotion, new child. So they're looking at all the variables that can influence what family is, and how we learn to be a family is not static, it's very dynamic. Therefore, the best way to understand the relationship between family members is to take a closer look at the meanings each other's words and behavior have and how they interpret them. A few of the ways we do this includes putting ourselves in another's place. It's called role taking. From daughter to mother, from son to father, that relationship of how we mimic and role take our parents' roles and try them on for size when we're children. Role conflict occurs because multiple roles that we take have competing demands for our time and energy. Parent, student, employee, there are times that these compete with one another for our time. And this can lead to what's known as role strain. And I'm sure many of you who are students, parents, and employed can identify with role strain. Role strain is a sense of discomfort felt by one who has difficult meeting all the roles that they're expected to meet. Now, the value of symbolic interactionalism is the emphasis placed on the people's responsibility in shaping their views of the world. And as a result, it's been used as the basis of family therapy. Its major weakness is that it ignores factors such as laws, economy, social class, and social values, and it doesn't explain society-wide changes in family. They don't have a macro view. They concentrate on the interactions between individuals rather than the social system. They're interested in the meanings people associate with events, symbols, words, and actions. Now, fourthly, we'll have a quick look at family as a system theory. Now, this theory considers the family as a system containing a set of interrelated and interacting parts, the family members. Anything that affects one part of the family will affect all of its parts. A child gets ill, it affects everybody. A parent's divorce, it affects everybody. Strength of family systems theory is the ability to account for impact of one individual's behavior on all members. For example, if a parent is stressed and angry, this will likely have an impact on all family members. Families also contain subsystems or smaller groupings of members within a family. Now, most commonly that you'd be familiar with there's a subgroup of spouses or parents, there's a subsystem of siblings. Systems and subsystems have boundaries, which mark who is and who is not a member. So we have ways of defining our family boundaries, our sibling boundaries, our parent boundaries. Boundaries need to open enough to interact with society, employment, schools, and friends. Strength of family systems theory is its ability to account for impact of one individual's behavior on all members. It explains why destructive behavior occurs across generations. And as a result, many therapists use it as a base for their work with families. Family systems weakness includes a concentration on family system as a whole, overlooks experiences of individuals, especially women, in cases of domestic violence. It assumes destructive behavior is a vicious cycle, little to no reference to the important social factors, although the theory is quite capable of including such influences. Now, the next one we'll look at is the Feminist Approach, and they've had a great impact and is the driving force for much of the current research on family. Feminists focus both in the macro and the micro perspectives. Gender is a necessary category to understand and explain the inequities in home, in paid labor, in politics, in law, and in culture. Now, the feminists view the patriarchal view of the family as what they see as the primary problem, the basis of power and authority of men in society, that's the macro view, and in the family, the micro view. Gender socialization is the process by which individuals learn the socially defined behavior that is appropriate for what is male and what is female. The inequity begins right there. As we learn what and how to behave in a masculine and feminine manner, boys typically had been expected to be active, aggressive. Girls were expected to be nurturing and sensitive to others. There's still some widespread acceptance of the idea that a woman can be fulfilled only as a wife and mother. It's known as the myth of motherhood. Some ways the patriarchy and inequity affect the family is some of the following are in the midst of changing. However, is still prevalent and still prevalent more than most are aware. So, for example, in homes, men tend to have more power and control than women to receive more, and they receive more benefits. A woman's housework after work finishes is known as the second shift. Paid labor. Men are paid more for equal work. In 2019, 76.8% of the dollar is the difference between what women make, 76.8%, and what men make, 100%, for doing the same job. Women have been discouraged from working in non-traditional family roles, the military, construction, STEM. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, some of this has been changing. I acknowledge that, and you should be aware of that. It is still not equitable. Politics. Women are not equally represented in politics given their numbers. In the law, feminists made initial headway when women won the right to be seen as a person and to vote. That was in 1929. Think in Manitoba and Nellie McClune. They could not only vote, but they could also own property, and that was all by 1929. Culture. Women are underrepresented for their achievements as part of Canadian culture. One great thing that we've seen more recently is women's hockey and women's soccer taking a front row position and being acknowledged as Canadian icons within our culture. And so that's great to see. Feminists also support equity in the workplace. Pay and promotion opportunities as an example. They're criticized for placing too much emphasis on the role gender plays in the social interaction. Now, next we'll look at another theory, and it's known as the Ecological Theory, and it looks at the relationship between family and society. It sees families as part of the interlocking system that influences each other at 5 levels. Okay, I'm going to start going through these one at a time. The micro level, or the microsystem, it consists of a small group in which people interact face to face. Directly affects the quality of life through relationships with individuals, therefore its nature and quality are really important. Each family member has a different microsystem. For example, that of a young children includes whoever cares for them during the day, including family, babysitter, or daycare system, each of them being a separate microsystem. The second group is what's known as the mesosystem, and it's made up of the relationships between 2 or more groups, which the individual is a member. Again, for a child, a mesosystem might consist of the relationship between parents and the daycare center. For a parent, a mesosystem might consist of the relationship between the family and the workplace. 3. The exosystem. The exosystem is a setting in which individuals do not take an active part in, but which has an effect on them through the meso or the microsystem. Now, this is where I was talking about before around sociological imagination. Not everything in the societal level do you have any influence or control of, that just occurs. And this is a representation of that. For parents, as an example of this, includes the school board or extended work hours. For children, it can include the family benefits that from parents' work, such as extended health care. Now, the fourth level is what's known as a macro system, and it consists of society's ideology and culture, where shared beliefs are the basis for policy decisions. Now, policies based on the assumptions concerning the pattern of relationships between the sexes, for example, the division of labor between males and female in and out of the family. Now, while such policies tend to be adjusting according to the changes in economics or political situation, changes do occur, but they occur slowly. The fifth system is known as the chronos system, and it includes dimensions of time as it relates to the social environment. External influences refer to the historic period and the cohorts, women in STEM, only in the last 25 years. Internal influences refer to the changes that occur as an individual matures. Consider your perspective when you're 20. It may not be the same perspective that you have when you're 60. Being 64, I can appreciate that. Strength of the ecology theory is that it explains how society and family interact. Now, lastly, we'll look at the developmentalists. We're going to look at these guys, they look at the entire life cycle of the family from its formation to its end. They break down a family into specific stages based on children and adult development. Now, they state that a family will change in predictable ways. When people marry, have a baby, there are developmental tasks to achieve. Society expects everyone to achieve the developmental tasks at the right time and to do so successfully, thus being able to achieve the next developmental task successfully without impediments. So, for example, having a baby when is socially expected. It varies over time, and it's getting later. It used to be having a baby in your late teens was the way to go. But today we see that having a baby, even your first baby at 30 or later, is becoming more usual. It allows for proper care and nurturing and career development by having things delayed. Now, each stage and task is related to a social time clock. Now, a social time clock. The social expectations, and it varies from culture to culture, when certain life events are to occur. At what age we're supposed to be dating, working, getting married, having babies. These all have a social time clock. Developmental theories have described as providing an idealized model of, that real families don't fit in. They rely on concept of nuclear family. Remember from What is a Family Part 1. The current research is now starting to respond to changing family forms. So now that we've done a quick review, and I appreciate it's been a quick review, most of the additional content you'll find in your textbook. We're going to look at how these theories came about, and it's through research. Lots and lots of research. These theories can ultimately influence government decisions, policies, both in government and corporations. Researching the family, since so much rests on our families in society, things like social policies, economic realities, education, gathering reliable and empirically based data is important for accuracy and to minimize the account or influence of personal belief. There are two broad categories for research that we're going to look at. First is quantitative research. Now listen to the word quantitative. Means lots or numbers, counting. Data is represented in numbers and then are analyzed using statistical computations. And they use surveys and experiments to gather this information. The second is qualitative. Qualitative. Lots and not much detail. Lots about anything, just lots and lots. Big net. think big net with lots of little holes. And if you drag that through a river, you'll pull up a lot of things. It picks up everything. And then it's up to the researchers and the theorists to sort of interpret the data. Once researchers have gathered their data and often perform statistical analysis, engaging in correlational, cross-sectional research, cohort effects studies, and longitudinal research, this form of research seeks to understand social conditions from people being studied. Direct information, it's more focused, it's direct information from people being observed. Direct verbal descriptions based on in-depth interviews and observations, then the analysis of patterns. In both, there is a premium on being specific and clear about your definitions, like what are you studying, and very deliberate control for experimental bias. You don't want experimental bias. All right, research methods. Let's have a quick review of these. Surveys are one research method. It's face-to-face, it's telephone, mail, or internet. If you've done a survey, you may have participated in one, and that's one way they gather information. Experiments is a second variety. Following good research design, this method changes one condition, the independent variable, to observe the effect of another condition, the dependent variable. Often this is done in labs. Then there are the natural experiments. They avoid the ethical and laboratory issues by observing in a natural setting and in various conditions as long as it's naturally occurring. Say you wanted to do some research on hockey parents. You go to a hockey game in an arena and you watch. That's an example of a natural condition for gathering information. Another way is through interviews, and it's the most common form of qualitative research. Use of open and closed questions. Open questions are giving respondents an opportunity to answer the way they want. You're not leading or influencing, and it takes a lot of practice. It's like asking the question, what sort of ice cream do you enjoy eating? You didn't lead anything other than to say ice cream and what choices. They can answer it any way they want. A closed question basically gives you a yes or no response. Do you like vanilla ice cream? Yes or no. That's a closed question. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to interview effectively. Another technique is known as use of focus groups, and it's a means of interviewing and engaging several people all at one time. These were very popular in the 60s when they were gathering information about anti-black, the feminist movements and feminist groups were trying to get a lot of information this way. They were known as rap groups, but focus groups are very much the same. And then there's naturalistic and participant observation. Naturalistic observations is observing in the natural environment without intrusion by an investigator. I used to work as a behavior consultant, and I go to daycares a lot to watch children. But there was one school that I would go to that had a two-way glass mirror. So I could sit on one way and look at the children and make my observations, but they would only see a mirror. So that's natural, where I'm not intruding on the daycare. Participant observation, where the investigator takes part in the activities and reports their experiences. There were many times I was doing my observations in daycares where I was in the daycare among the kids, and so you are a part of the activities, and so that you got to know that some part of you is affecting the overall observation experience, so you got to build that in. Another way of gathering information is through content analysis, and now this method, researchers analyze documents, images, and all kinds of records. They look at past research that's been done. Different techniques are used to do this analysis. Now, another technique that's used, and we'll just touch on it here, is what's known as correlational research. It's one technique for analyzing data is correlational. Here it's about cause and effect results. Instead, its results are about the relationship between variables. For example, there is no single cause for homelessness. However, the relationship between unemployment, family breakdown, mental health. These are variables that suggest they contribute in some way. They are correlational. There is a relationship between them. They often occur at the same time. We just can't say they cause homelessness. Cross-sectional research. Now, this is a method that studies people of different ages and compares them to whatever variable we are trying to study. Related is what's known as a cohort effect. And you'll hear this in research from time to time. And since there's so much differences that can exist between individuals over time, that 20-year-old and a 20-year-old from 1960 holds different values and points of view on topics from the 20-year-old from today. So the cohorts are really important to sort of look at these groups at these different times and compare them. The longitudinal research is a really valuable one, but takes a long time. One way to circumvent cohort effect is to use longitudinal research where this is where the same individuals are studied over time. The 20-year-old of the 60s is interviewed every decade since the 60s to current time, is an example of longitudinal. Okay, that now completes a review of Chapter 1, where we consider what is family, the legal, personal, social, and intentional definitions. We reviewed the varying theories to explain the role of family to its members and to society at large. And lastly, we considered the science of family sociology and the research methods. Now, next week, we're going to explore history of family, culture, and Canadian families. We consider race and ethnicity, some history of the Canadian families over time, and we're going to include the role of immigration. Okay, so that's Chapter 1, Chapters 1, Part 1, and Part 2 complete. Good luck, everybody, and keep up the good work. Bye now.